Today we're going to be having an in-depth review / discussion of the Tokyo Marui MP7A1. So the Marui MP7 has been out of the market for a very long time now, right about 2 to 3 years I think. And this video is basically going to give you guys a quick look at what you get with the Tokyo Marui MP7, and then I'll talk about the stock performance, the problems, the fixes, upgrade tips, accessory tips, along with a couple of final thoughts about the Marui MP7 as a whole, in comparison to some of the other airsoft MP7s out there, like from GBB or from VFC. So let's begin the video. As of June 2015, the Tokyo Marui MP7 comes in black or tan. In Hong Kong, these go for about 1,600 to 1,800 Hong Kong dollars, which translates to roughly around 230 US dollars, but probably more towards 250. The reason because for you guys who have to pay US prices, you guys have to factor in shipping and the fact that you're paying online prices. So those prices tends to be a little bit higher than what we pay in Hong Kong. That's just the way it is, unfortunately. Let's move on to the externals. So your Tokyo Marui won't come like this, of course. I've done a lot of modifications to mine, just to make it a little bit more friendlier for myself. But it does come with a very nice polymer body with a matte black finish, with a hint of gray in my opinion, and has your standard MP7 features like your markings, with the exception of your Marui marking, which is over here, very next to your index finger. And you have your normal grip texturing, of course, your side rails and your top rails. You will also have a foldable foregrip, which I have actually chopped off, removed, and did a lot of surgery work on this to basically install an FMA wide rail to put my BCM grip over here. This is just my personal preference. This is just a modification that I decided to do. For your fiddly bits, you have your selector and your bolt release, which are ambidextrous, with the bolt release working by pushing it upwards to release the bolt, and the selector being very stiff due to the fact that it has a dedicated D10 pin with a very stiff spring pushing up against the lever, giving the selector a very nice throw to it, a very nice feel to it. You can clearly feel the selector switch, and it's also very audible. However, I do find it to be a tiny bit stiff. It does sort of break in after you use it for a while. The Marui MP7 will also have a 3-position collapsible stock with a very nice rubberized butt pad. But do note that this stock does wobble a little bit when you have it all the way out on its maximum setting. In fact, it does wobble when you have it on the lowest setting as well. But this is common on most PDW style stocks, with a few exceptions of course. And you have to remember, this is a lot thinner than most other PDW style stocks. Moving forward, we have your MP7 sights, which are very cool. They function as both pistol sights and flip-up iron sights. I personally think that most PDW should have this kind of sights on it just because they're really cool and very unique. I personally painted mine with glow-on paint just to give it a little bit of a better glow when it's in its pistol format and also in its flip-up format. We also have of course, the MP7 folding grip, which is what it's partially famous for. It's probably the most classic look for an MP7. There are MP7s there out there without that folding grip that uses a rail, like the way I have it set up right now. As I mentioned before, I chopped it off. The real reason why I actually chopped it off is because most airsoft MP7s out there with a grip, with the folding grip, it wobbles a lot. So that's personally the reason why I decided to chop it off. That includes the VFC and GBB as well. I find the VFC one to be a little bit more sturdier, but then again, it's a little bit bigger than most of the other MP7s. To my understanding, the VFC one is in fact real spec size. And lastly, we have the MP7 clockwise flash hider, which I have over here, which is okay in terms of looks, but the coating on this wears out very quickly, and it sort of scratches if you're really rough with it. So I decided to get rid of it and use my PTS AAC silencer, which I have over here. Simply screws on top of the flash hider like so, and there you have your quick detached silencer. It is worth noting that if you decide to use any aftermarket silencers on there that is not made specifically for the Tokyo Marui MP7, you may need to use the adapter. And Marui actually provides you a clockwise to counterclockwise adapter, allowing you to put any sort of muzzle device that you want that you would normally put on your AEGs. For example, even though this particular silencer was made specifically for the Marui MP7, or just an MP7 in general, I actually needed the adapter for this in order to put this flash hider on and then put my silencer on. So that's actually the setup I have right here. In fact, you can partially see the adapter, which is right there, which is this metal piece right here. As for the shooting performance, a completely stock Tokyo Marui MP7 will have a relatively sluggish cycling rate, and this is because of two things. First, the bolt on the Marui MP7 is one of the biggest out there in the market. It's bigger than the GBB and bigger than the VFC one. making the Marui MP7 one of the most hardest kicking MP7, but certainly not one of the fastest ones in terms of cycling rate. There are some people who are satisfied with it, but for me personally, I find it to be barely satisfactory. I had to work on the cycling rate immediately the second I got this, when I first picked up one in Canada. That was actually the first thing I worked on because I was using duster gas, so I needed to see if I can bump it up to green gas, kick up the cycling rate, and also smooth up the bolt operation. The second thing that you would like to take note for the slow cycling rate of the bolt is that the bolt actually travels all the way back, unlike a KW MP7, where the KW MP7 always just goes like a part way. The Marui MP7 goes the whole entire way. And let me quickly show you this. So, look over here. I have one magazine in, an empty magazine. Okay. So right now it's on bolt lock. Can you actually see how far the bolt is? It's actually locked very, very far back. So this naturally means that with a big bolt, with a full stroke bolt, it's going to be much slower than the KWA. Again, for all you guys who've been using KWAs for a very long time, you would find the Marui one to be very unsatisfactory. The one thing that people normally get these for is because it's a lot of fun to use. Like, trust me, the Marui MP7 is just a lot of fun to use, but it's just not a big performer compared to the KWA, and we'll talk about that later on towards the end of the video as well. So now we're at Info Workshop and Training Center, and they've basically given me permission to film there. Thank you guys for letting me do so. It's a very awesome place. They have a 30-meter range where I'll be testing the accuracy and precision of the Tokyo Marui MP7. I'll also be showing you guys what the magazine dump tests are like, although do not treat the magazine dump tests as an accurate representation of what the stock Tokyo Marui will actually perform like. The reason why is because I've actually done some modification to mine. But otherwise, the accuracy test should be a good representation, because I did no modifications to my barrel, hop-up unit, or hop-up arm. So this should go well. Let's see what we can do. So now we're moving on to the reliability test. So basically right here, I have a fully tanked up mag, fully loaded up, just like before. And basically what we'll do is that we'll do one of these mags on single fire and the second mag on full auto fire. And basically we'll see if it bolt locks, how reliable it is, and all that stuff. And again, keep in mind, I've done some modifications to mine. I'll note all of these modifications later on in the video. We'll also be showing you an accuracy test shortly after. So let's show you guys the reliability. Should have done that earlier. Oh, just to show you guys something, one of the neat things about the Marui is that let's say you load it around and then you suddenly don't want it, right? You can just charge it, and you see the BB, it just fell out, okay? So, let me just quickly add another BB because it just cleared one. Fully loaded, let's go single fire. Okay, so that was single fire. Full auto. As you saw, single fire, it did slow down towards the end, of course. It's natural for all these long magazines, and I'll explain why this later on. This is actually one of those flaws to the Tokyo Marui system that I found. In fact, it's a flaw for most long magazines. Oh, sorry, accidentally touched the bolt release. Alright guys, so I'm going to do the shooting test with 0.2 gram BBs with green gas. Now, unfortunately guys, I will not be shooting from the table. The table is actually right here. Okay, I won't be leaning on the table or shooting from it. The reason why is because it is very difficult to look through this red dot while leaning on the table. So I have to stand up and shoot. So I might miss a lot. This is by no means a good test of the accuracy because I'm not eliminating a lot of the human factors and one of the other factors. But this is the best I can do. It's just because it is super difficult to look through this red dot sight. The reason why I use this though is because in game I can find the dot much easier, and I find because since the border of the red dot is so small, I can see what's around me as well. So here we go. We'll just take the shooting test and see what we can do. And we are going to go all the way to 30 meters. So I don't know if you can see the target. Okay, so here is the gun. So, firing. So let's talk a little bit about what we saw there. So the firing mechanism and the firing reliability and all that stuff has always been very stable for me. The only thing that I've really done is I enhanced it from the stock performance because I didn't like the cycling rate. So that's the reason why I had to kick up the cycling rate. And I also made the bolt lock slightly more reliable, and I did do some modifications. I'll explain all of those modifications in my prom section. In fact, my prom section in the video is also the part of the video where I show you how to enhance the performance of the Tokyo Marui MP7. So you go ahead and watch that if you guys want to enhance the performance of your MP7 if you already have one. But anyways, back to the main point. Basically, it's a stable system, very predictable system, very not too many problems. And if you do have problems, they can be fixed very easily, in my personal opinion. As for the shooting performance, I personally find that 30 to 40 meters is a very practical distance for this gun. You must understand that the barrel length is only about 140 to 150 millimeters. That means that that's only about 60 to 50 millimeters longer than a Glock barrel. So you must understand, the barrel is very, very short. In fact, the barrel is still inside the body. It only ends about here. So you must understand that's a very, very short barrel. 30 to 40 meters is how I will range this gun at. And this is how I did at 30 to 40 meters. Now, I know this is not a very good grouping. This grouping you cannot see on camera, but this is actually a 7.5 inch grouping, which is pretty bad. But again, you have to remember, I'm shooting freehand. I cannot see the red dot clearly. I don't have a cheek weld or anything like that. The barrel is very, very short, so I personally think that this is not super, super accurate. I certainly wish it was tighter, but I would say it is skirmishable, and the BBs shoot in a very predictable way. In my personal opinion, I don't think that the Tokyo Marui hop-up system gives you superior range and accuracy. I find that the Tokyo Marui hop-up system gives you superior stability and predictability. I would say the stability and predictability is very, very good on the Tokyo Marui hop-up systems. That's the only reason why I prefer Tokyo Marui's in that sense, is because it just works very reliably in that sense. For the range and accuracy, you can go further if you wish. For example, there are people that shoot 50 meters, 60 meters with these, but I personally think they're either overhopping the BB or holding a very, very high holdover with a red dot. You can go ahead and try that for yourself, but at a very practical distance, a skirmishable distance, shooting quickly, I find that 30 to 40 meters is very practical for a gun of this size. That's just my personal opinion. Okay, so for this part of the video, basically we're going to be talking about the really, really complicated stuff, the very, very boring stuff. You don't have to watch it, but if you want to know everything about the Marui MP7, then maybe this can be useful for you. So the first problem I want to talk about is actually the cycling rate. One easy thing that I've done is basically add a creation recoil spring with a buffer on the recoil spring. I trimmed the recoil spring by 4 coils, and it made basically the movement of the recoil spring going back a little bit lighter, but still plenty of snapback. The second thing that I've done is that I polished the bolt. So basically what that does is that just makes the cycling rate overall a little bit faster. The cycling rate is really not that big of a problem. It's more like if you play in cold weather, if you feel like it's not sufficient for you, then that is something that you can work on. So these first couple of problems we talk about are all the very, very minor stuff that you don't have to do. Second problem we'll talk about another very, very minor thing, which is basically the magazines. Now, the magazines does have a tendency to leak from the bottom. I find that all the O-rings on the top, as I mentioned before, the floating, I don't know if I mentioned this earlier, the floating valve on this is actually exactly the same as the Glock floating valve for Tokyo Marui. So, to me, this is like basic stuff. Like, I know exactly what can go wrong and what cannot go wrong. We won't mention it in this video because in general, there's nothing that can go wrong over here. But most of the problem occurs over here, where there's a leak. I will warn you right now, if you try to torque this fill valve out, make sure you do it gently. You can actually physically crack this fill valve and it'll forever be stuck in here. Let me show you an example. This is a magazine that is now completely useless. Can you actually see that the fill valve is still in there? Don't know if you can tell. It's actually still physically in there, and the stuff and the part over there that allows you to put a valve key to turn that fill valve out has snapped off. So basically, it's forever stuck in there. This is just a dud mag. I drop it on the ground. I even sometimes shoot this magazine. It's actually pretty funny now that this is completely useless. But I will warn you right now that if you have a leak right here and if you want to fix it with an O-ring, it's very simple to do. You just have to you have to wear your baby gloves and just treat this fill valve very, very gently. It breaks so easy. When it broke, I didn't even notice that it broke. So from there on onwards, I was very, very gentle with all my fill valves, and everything worked very, very easily. The tendency for these magazines to leak is quite often, because when you actually charge gas over here, you can see a bunch of gas spewing out. So sometimes people like to take off and put it back in, take off, put it back in, and that just wears out the O-ring over here. Now, this third problem is probably going to be one of the things that affect Tokyo Marui MP7 users a lot. It is certainly one of those things that Tokyo Marui MP7 haters will purposely pick at you at. This problem is, it may be very famous to you already. It's basically when the bolt is out of battery, when it's not in the correct position, the trigger will not work, and I'll demonstrate this for you right now. Now, basically, when your bolt is roughly around here, and if it stays there, if it stays like this, if it stays like that, your trigger will not work. Now, you have to understand, in my situations, mine can still work. The reason why is because I've done some modifications internally to my Tokyo Marui MP7 to make it work reliably. I actually completely eliminated this problem from my Tokyo Marui MP7. That's the reason why mine can still work even though the bolt is out of battery. My bolt technically cannot go out of battery unless I purposely put it into this position, because the recoil spring always brings it back into battery. Even though if I do this, it always goes back into battery. I have to purposely rest it. See, you see, I'm actually having trouble resting it on the part that's actually causing this. There's an actual physical part inside that causes your bolt to rest on something and go out of battery. I'll explain what that part is right now. Let me first show you how it works. I will show you how it works, and then I'll show you internally as to what's happening. So, right now, can you see? The hammer is cocked. This silver thing right here, that's the hammer. It's a big, big hammer. It's cocked right now. So when the hammer is cocked, when I pull the trigger, it should work, right? This is me pulling the trigger. Okay, this is the trigger bar. I'm moving the trigger. Notice the hammer is not falling. You don't hear anything, right? Hammer is still locked. Now, the reason why this is happening is because there are actually two sears that engage the hammer. The first one is this sear. This sear is the trigger bar sear. That's what I'm calling it. There is actually a second sear, and the second sear is right over here. Can you actually see this little thing? This little thing I'm poking at? This little silver part right here? That is the second sear. Now, so basically, your third problem of your bolt going out of battery is basically your bolt is not able to disengage the second sear. Your second sear is still engaged. That's the reason why whenever you pull this sear, your hammer will not fall. It's because it's still being locked by something else. This second sear is still holding onto that hammer. Okay, so I just cracked open the bolt. Whenever you crack open this, make sure you put your hand here because there's a sear spring over here. I will take off that sear spring because I know it's going to fly out on me because it flew out on me several times already. So, I have to reposition the camera. Let me explain what you're actually looking at. Okay, so, in here, now you should not be doing this because I'm confident holding it, so I'm perfectly fine doing this. Now, basically, can you see? This is the trigger sear, right? Imagine if I was moving this trigger sear right now with my trigger bar, right? Can you see this hook over here? This area over here? It doesn't really matter whether or not it's engaged. Can you actually still see that the hammer is still locked, regardless of how I move it? That is how everything works. That's the reason why your hammer is not falling. That's the reason why, for problem number 3, when your bolt is all battery, your trigger will feel mushy. It feels mushy because as long as the second sear is still engaged, your trigger, you can just keep moving your trigger and your gun will not fire. Okay, that's the reason why. This actually physically shows you what's happening. Okay, but notice what happens. The second I push the second sear, the hammer will fall. I'm going to push it. And it fell. Now, let me also show you how your gun should work. Your gun should work by basically your bolt, as it goes back, it already pushes the second sear, and your hammer is in that position. It should be doing that immediately. After it does that, all you have to do is pull your trigger, and your hammer will fall. That's how everything works. Very, very simple. The answer to that is just basically there's a spring on this side that you can only take apart by popping these screws out. That spring can shoot out very, very quickly because it's under a law of tension. I'm actually too afraid to take that part because that part shoots out like all the time. I must have lost a spring like 2 times by now. I found it by luck because my floor is white. Anyways, just letting you know that that's basically how you solve problem number 3. Just make that spring lighter. You may want to polish this end of the sear, of the second sear. That's the tip of the second sear that locks the hammer. You may want to polish that a little bit just to make it go in and go out of the hammer a little bit easier. I did a little bit, not by too much. So that's pretty much it, really. That's how you solve the third problem. Now, this fourth problem is actually more of not really a problem with the gun itself. It has to do with it has a problem with the person who's taking apart the Tokyo Marui MP7. So basically what I found out is, you see this trigger bar over here? You see how long that trigger bar is? What I found out was that when some people disassemble their trigger bars, you can sometimes accidentally damage it if you're too rough with it. Now, the problem that can occur is basically whenever you pull your trigger, it will feel like it will take extra effort. Or it will feel like the breaking point is not super, super clear. Basically, when trigger bar is bent, those are the kind of effects you get. All you simply do is take the trigger bar out, leave it on a table, and make sure it's perfectly flat. Make sure that this flat. Let me actually quickly take it out. Okay, it's very, very easy. Just simply pry it off. There's a spring in here. Don't lose it. There's a spring that actuates the trigger bar. Don't lose that. Basically, take your trigger bar, place it on a table, make sure it's flat. That's all you do. Very, very basic. I didn't modify anything here. Just make sure it's perfectly flat. Another side effect of you... Okay, so for this fifth problem, is not really a problem whatever. I'm just giving you a bunch of accessory tips, and this is important because this is something that I'm pretty sure some people are going to screw up on, because I've seen a couple of people already made that kind of mistake, and it was very, very, very difficult for me to correct it for them. So let me first talk about what I have here right now. So basically this is an FMA wide rail, as I mentioned. They do make different versions of it. There are also other aftermarket companies that make these kinds of rails. So basically all my rail pieces are detachable. That's the reason why I like it. I can take some off or put some on whenever I want. It's wider so I can rest my hand on it. Now, in order for you to actually install this rail onto a Tokyo Marui MP7, you have to chop off the grip. But it's actually not as simple as that. There's actually a metal piece right there that makes it very, very difficult for you to chop. It's so difficult that I had to mill mine off. It took me a good an hour and a half just to remove that grip. It was really, really annoying. What I recommend you to do is that take a Dremel with a mill head, remove the plastic around that metal piece. After you remove it, it exposes the metal, and then you can find whatever way you want to cut the metal. I personally used an actual mill, like one of those mills that you use to mill slides off at a side at an angle. I actually used one of those to actually cut one off. So that took me quite a long time to tell the truth. If you don't have that particular option, I'm pretty sure in the US you must have plenty of options to do that stuff because, well, you guys actually have the better milling machines. All our milling machines here, I can't tell which one's good because they're all from China. The second thing I want to talk about is probably the most important part in terms of accessories is your silencers. Now, I know a silencer is not necessary, okay, but it's an MP7. I'm pretty sure you guys will go for it. So, one of the biggest problems with actually adding accessories is two things. There are two problems that can occur. One is if it hits the suppressor at the tip. A lot of the aftermarket suppressors that are made, with the few exceptions, PTS is an exception, UFC is an exception. UFC worked for me, believe it or not. Angry Gun did not work for me, for example. I'm not saying Angry Gun didn't make it well. I'm saying that because the silencer wobbles, because this wobbles, the BB is naturally going to hit the tip of the suppressor. So that's the reason why I'm going to go right ahead and say that don't get the Angry Gun one unless you're willing to do some modifications to it. Or unless you're willing to put a big O-ring on the flash hider to make it a little bit more stable. So, basically, when you decide to get a suppressor, besides looking at the tip where the BB hits, you have to make sure there's enough space for the BB to come out. The second thing you want to look at is this front piece over here. Okay? Now, this front piece over here can be clicked off. I cannot access mine because can you see at the bottom over here? I actually cannot access it because it's closed off unless I wiggle a screwdriver in to pull off. Now, basically, when you pull off that whole entire front chassis, that also is the part that has the threading. And there's a part in there that interfaces with the inner barrel. What I did was that, in order to make this a little bit more stable and less wobbly, I stuffed 2 pieces of Teflon tape on the side, stuffed it in, pressed it in, and now it's solid as a rock. That's all you do. In fact, mine's so solid, I haven't taken it out since the first day I put it in. I've also did this to my MP7 in Canada. That's what partially made it so reliable whenever I put a suppressor on. It's because it's very, very stable. If you put a suppressor on something that's very, very stable, even though the suppressor is heavy, it may not tip it. Basically, with the sheer weight of it will not cause the threads to be like that. So the trick is to make this part stable, and then afterwards, find a good suppressor that can work for you. Now, for the 6th problem, I left this problem for the last to explain because that 6th problem is can be solved very, very easily. This is a problem that a lot of people have problems making a decision on. Is basically about your aftermarket nozzles. So the stock Tokyo Marui nozzle, I can guarantee you, it will break very, very quickly. I cannot quote you exactly when it will break. I just know it will break at some point. There are reports of it breaking very, very early. There are reports of it breaking very, very late. For me, it broke relatively quickly. Don't bet on it lasting. I guarantee you the nozzle will not last. If you're in Hong Kong, there are some people in Hong Kong who use the Tokyo Marui with green gas, and they claim the nozzle has been lasting. I cannot comment on that, but I'm going to tell you right now that the nozzle will break at some point. It will definitely break. I don't know when. It just will. So, there are 5 aftermarket options. I only have 4 here. The last company is WeTech. WeTech makes a metal nozzle. I do not have that one. I cannot comment on that one. In fact, I've never even seen one. This right here is in action. This right here is Guns Modify. This one is Ready Fighter. The one in my bolt is the Creation one. Now, let me first talk about the Action one. The Action one, it did nothing for me. I did not get an FPS increase. I did not get a cycling rate increase. The compression with the stock Tokyo Marui piston, which is a piston cup. Let me just get this for you. It's a piston cup on the stock Tokyo Marui one. It seemed to have a very good compression, but for some reason the cycling rate didn't kick up or anything like that. Nothing. In fact, I didn't get anything from this. And I will tell you that there are reports of this breaking. Some people have broken this. I'm not exactly sure how they broke it, but there are several reports of people breaking these, okay? So I won't say that this is the best nozzle that you can get. Guns Modify 1. Guns Modify 1 worked out very, very well. 20 FPS increase, which was very, very, very surprising. Like when my FPS shot up that high, I was like, whoa, what happened? Like my Tokyo Marui was shooting 360 FPS with this. However, the rocket valve inside here broke. Okay, it actually pancaked itself. Now, this is my personal opinion. Could take it for what it's worth. I think the rocket valve structure is very, very thin. I think that's the reason why it broke. So my personal recommendation is that don't get this unless you're willing to accept the fact that the rocket valve might break. There are people in Hong Kong using this and it hasn't broken, but my personal opinion, if there's a chance of it breaking, I'm not going to use it. The outside shell is perfectly fine. The compression is perfectly fine. Last thing I want to note about the Guns Modify one is that the tip here is wide. It's actually a very, very wide tip. It's very hard to show this to you on camera. But this will actually get stuck in your hop-up unit. This was actually inside my stock Tokyo Marui hop-up. It was sticky. It was very, very sticky. So that's the reason why, another reason as to why I don't like the Guns Modify one. Ready Fighter 1 worked perfectly fine. I didn't get any FPS increase in this. The reason why that is because the diameter inside here is super, super wide. Like, holy god, like, there is zero compression with this piston. You literally have to pick up a piston with an actual physical O-ring in order for this to work. Just to let you heads up, this is a TSC piston. I believe it's from TSC. This is specifically for the Tokyo Marui. And I had to use this in conjunction with this in order for this nozzle to work. Like, the diameter of this is just crazy, crazy wide. I'm not sure if it's because the diameter is super, super wide, or is it because the inside is so smooth that it doesn't feel like there's any sort of compression. I can tell you for a fact that I've had this in my gun for like a month. It didn't give me any sort of FPS increase. And then for the creation nozzle, this is the nozzle that I personally use. This nozzle for me, when you first install it, it doesn't look like it has good compression. But for me, for some particular reason, after I installed this, I noticed that my cycling rate increased. My FPS increased by about 10. So that's the reason why you see me using this nozzle, is because it worked instantly. It was a drop-in and it worked. Very simple. However, out of all these nozzles, the Creation one is the most expensive one. I believe this is $25 US, maybe even 30. The Ready Fighter is cheap. The Action is cheap. You don't even have to think about these two. The Guns Modify one is about 200 Hong Kong dollars. It's probably around 20 US dollars. But the Creation one is by far the most expensive one out of these plastic nozzles. I'm not exactly sure how much the WeTech one is. Again, I don't have any experience on that nozzle, but I can tell you that this nozzle is expensive. That's the one complaint I have about it. But it works. It works very, very well. So I was very, very happy when I got this nozzle. So that's basically how you solve the nozzle problem. Get the Creation one. I highly recommend it. Alright guys, so that's pretty much it for the review so far. The last part we'll talk about is the advantages, and then a quick discussion about the VFC, KWA, and Marui. So, in terms of advantages, the biggest advantage that you get from the Tokyo Marui is the system reliability. The reliability of it striking the flowing valve and everything is super, super, super reliable. It is pretty much incapable of light striking. Did you see how big the valve knocker is and how big the hammer is? It's incredibly, incredibly stable, especially once you get the bulk cycle fast, and especially once you solve that second sear problem. The second sear problem is basically when your ball battery doesn't work, your trigger does not work. Right after you solve that cycling and that second sear problem, which is I already showed you how, it works like really, really well. Like, this is by far probably one of the most stable guns that I have at home, to tell the truth. It's not the best performing one, but it's certainly super, super stable. I would say that relative to all the other ones, Marui wins in terms of stability, because the hop-up works. It's very stable. It works, as I told you, that I've done absolutely nothing to it. You may have saw me as I disassembled it. Mine was completely stocked. I've done nothing to it. Everything in here just works really, really well, Very, very stable, very, very predictable, very easy to fix. And let me point out another thing. Let's say one day if you have a bolt lock issue, you can actually just keep trimming away that bolt lock lever, and you'll make your bolt lock earlier and earlier, and because it's earlier, you can short stroke the bolt if you really want to. That's the kind of flexibility that you have with the Tokyo Marui system. It's because since the bolt just travels so fast, you can do a lot of different things midway. It just makes the Tokyo Marui very, very simple to operate in that sense. It is also the easiest to disassemble amongst all the other airsoft MP7s out there. This includes the VFC and KBOA. Tokyo Marui is by far the simplest. All the springs are encapsulated or encased. The only springs that have the chance of you losing is the sear spring and the second sear spring. Those springs can actually shoot out. Other than those two springs, everything else in here is contained and very easily, you can handle it very, very easily. Very straightforward to deal with. Another advantage I would give is that considering that this has been around for a very long time, all the key aftermarket upgrade parts are already available. I already explained to you that I only have 2 aftermarket parts in here. It's only because I actually needed it, and that's about it, really. I would say that a disadvantage, though, a very, very big disadvantage that the Tokyo Marui has that just completely kills it, is the price point. The price point of the Tokyo Marui is not exactly cheap. The mags are not cheap. If you buy the nozzle and the recoil spring, it's not cheap. Like, these all kind of total up to something that's quite high. So if I were you, don't get the Tokyo Marui unless you're willing to pay a little bit more. Just a little bit more. That being said, the KWA and VFC also has its bad points that can cause you to suddenly pay a lot of money. If you're not familiar with the KWA system, and if you're not familiar with this, you already know the problems here now. The KWA also has a lot of problems on its own. A lot of people in the US claim that the KWA works perfectly. It's one of the most reliable guns that they've ever owned. You have to understand that when the KWA breaks down, there are some things in there that are not fixable. You have to purposely ask KWA for aftermarket parts that will also break again at some time in the future. That's the only reason why I ultimately abandoned my KWA. I used the KWA for many, many years. Okay, I remember the first year I couldn't do anything at all because when parts started to break, there were no aftermarket parts available unless you buy directly from KWA. That's some of the stuff that I really, really don't like. For example, like the trigger bar lever, I forgot what you call it. When that disappears, basically you'll have some selective fire issues. You also have issues with the follower, and that you have to sand down with your hands. Something that touches the BB, I'm not a big fan of sanding that down. You will also have nozzle problems. The second you switch to CB bolt, your rate of fire immediately goes down unless you do a lot of work to it. You can have hammer string problems. You can have light striking problems. You can even have gas efficiency problems. Even if your bolt doesn't even go the full stroke and it's lighter. Those are all the problems that can occur with the KWA. Now, in order for you to make your decision on that, I recommend to you that whichever problems that you find easier to solve, go with that MP7 if you're set on buying an MP7. Let me clarify this for you. In Hong Kong, for example, we have a lot of experts that are very familiar with the KWA and KSC system because it has been around for quite a long time. Many people use it, many people still use it, many people are still buying it, and there are a lot of gun docs out there that really know their stuff and know how to fix it. So that's why in Hong Kong, a lot of people tend to lean a little bit towards the KSC and KWA because people understand how to fix it and how to deal with it. For example, even though some parts are very difficult to find, they understand how to identify those problems and fix it very quickly. Unlike the Tokyo Marui, not too many people understand on how to fix it. Not too many people understand what the problem is. So that's the reason why not many people in Hong Kong use Maruis. As far as I can tell, it doesn't seem like many people like the Maruis. In fact, given a choice, they would probably pick KSC and KWA because everyone in Hong Kong, as far as I can tell, okay, this is as far as I can tell, seems to pick or immediately lean towards KSC and KWA anyways. In fact, if you're in the US, I believe all of you prefer the KWA and KSC. The moral of the story is not to tell you which gun is better. It's simply to tell you that whichever gun is easier for you to solve, whichever gun seems cheaper to you, whichever gun seems more straightforward to you, get that one. I'm telling you right now that if you're interested in the KWA, research on it. There are problems with it. Look it up. If you use it for a very long time, the second you pump 1,000 rounds through it, you spam the trigger long enough, use it for long enough, you're going to have problems. Just like this, it also has problems. But it also has its advantages and disadvantages. The last thing I'll talk about is the VFC. This is a VFC, by the way. I don't know if you can tell, the size is significantly bigger. The one thing I cannot advise you on is how to upgrade this or how to deal with this. The VFC MP7 so far is the one gun I truly do not understand. I have taken... This MP7 is not mine. It belongs to a friend of mine. I'm not allowed to fire it or take it apart. But I'll tell you right now, the bolt travels all the way back. It's very hard to pull the bolt. It's not very gas efficient. You'll be lucky to fire a whole entire mag. Most people cannot. It has a lot of problems. I've had a lot of light striking problems more than anything else, to tell the truth. I have gas efficiency problems. That's also a very, very big thing. There's just problems in and out with the VFC. Be quite honest with you, I cannot advise you on anything about this. All I can tell you is that I've been having so many problems that I'm stuck. This is a problem. This is probably a system that I'll never understand, is because I don't know what's wrong with it, to tell the truth. I can't even figure out why it's performing the way it does. So for this system, if you're looking for advice, this is the wrong place for you. I'm so sorry about that, even though I played with a couple already and taken apart a couple. Man, it's just so complicated. I don't understand. I've done everything I could to it and it still performs like crap. The best I can do was get it to fire, but it cannot fire a whole entire mag. That's the best I've ever done with a VFC MP7. So anyways, guys, that's officially it for the video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope this video was helpful to you. Let me know if these kinds of videos is something what people look for. It's something that what you look for online on YouTube. Thanks for watching. Please feel free to comment, like, and subscribe. I also have a Facebook page that you can follow me on, where you can see me do more updates on regular guns and stuff, as well as updates I do on other stuff. Peace, guys. Happy shooting, and thanks.